There's a lot of noise out there, so let's simplify things. If you want Scotland to be independent, the only way to vote is both votes yes. On May the 6th, you have 2 votes. On your constituency ballot paper, vote SNP for your local SNP candidate. On your regional ballot paper, vote ALBA party to ensure a supermajority for independence. The weight of these 2 votes combined will tip the balance in Scotland's favour and guarantee we get a supermajority for independence in the Scottish Parliament this year. Be involved at albaparty.org.
Hello and welcome everyone to ALBA Party's national campaign launch on this, the anniversary of the Declaration of Scottish Independence signed in Arbroath in 1320. My name is Cynthia Guthrie and I'm standing as a candidate for the ALBA Party in South Scotland on the regional list at the elections on 6th of May. I'm a company director and co-owner of a business in West Lothian and in the Borders. Business is my passion, and I would like to see greater focus on business and regional economic development across all parts of Scotland, not just some. We must stimulate the economy and invest in the provision of a socially just, fair and equal society for all. I've always referred to myself as Scottish and totally believe in our sovereign right to self-determination. Why would you want to give away 100% of your revenues to get around half back and be told to stay in budget and have no say or benefit over the rest of your money? It simply doesn't make sense. I joined the SNP in 2014 after David Cameron reneged on the promises and the infamous vow that they made to the Scottish people. Brexit's really bad for Scottish business. We never asked for it, but we now have a way out. Please vote for ALBA on the regional list on 6th May to give a supermajority of independence parties in Parliament and put us back on the road to independence. On this important day, before we hear from our leader and former First Minister Alex Salmond, let's meet some of our other candidates.
Hello, my name is Michelle Ferns. I'm a councillor in the East End of Glasgow and I'm honoured to be a candidate on the Glasgow list standing for the ALBA party. I'm standing for ALBA because I believe more than ever that Scotland needs to be independent and it needs to be independent urgently. A supermajority in the Scottish Parliament for independence simply cannot be ignored. The effects of the pandemic, coming hot on the heels of a decade of Tory austerity, has made what was already a tenuous and insecure position for many families and children into a crisis. A universal credit system that's not fit for purpose, benefit sanctions and a huge increase in the use of food banks. Add in Brexit and it adds up to a perfect storm for many families in Scotland and shows that Scotland needs to be in a position to do more than mitigate against the worst effects of Tory policy in London. It needs the levers of an independent country to tackle the reasons for poverty and inequality. A country where we stop talking about a minimum wage and start delivering a real living wage. A vote for ALBA and a supermajority for independence is our best chance for delivering independence for Scotland. Now is the time. Scotland can't afford to wait.
Hi, I'm Ailsa Gray and I'm a businesswoman and corporate lawyer by background. Scotland is a rich country, rich in resources and rich in human capital. And yet, being shackled to Westminster, we have ended up also being an incredibly unequal country. And it doesn't have to be like that. In Scandinavian countries, they measure whether their citizens benefit from their economic growth. People matter as much as profits. But Britain is broken. Boris's Brexit led to catastrophic delays, confusion, and a 63% slump in Scottish exports. That's 20% worse than the UK figures. Scottish businesses were pawns, they were dispensable, and many have been pushed to the brink of bankruptcy. The forthcoming Internal Markets Bill is a constitutional sabotage and nothing short of that. Westminster can bypass our Scottish Parliament and run amok with our food and environmental standards and our public health. And we have little time. On 6th May, you have the power to seize back the control for the Scottish people. to secure the independence majority that we will need to develop our economy in a way that fulfills Scotland's potential and also looks after Scotland's people.
Equality is fundamental in building a fairer, independent Scotland. A Scotland where no one is left behind, where fairness, opportunity, dignity and respect are our foundations, where diversity is celebrated. But this cannot come at the expense of women's hard-won rights. Women and girls continue to face barriers and disadvantages in life, from the sex-based pay gap to inequalities in health, inequalities in sport, and inequalities in opportunities. Women need to feel safe in an independent Scotland, and be assured the ALBA party will protect women and girls' rights.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Riley. I'm standing for the ALBA party in Mid-Scotland and Fife. I'm standing for ALBA because I believe Scotland needs to be a fairer, more equal and just society. In order to do that, we need to have full control over our country, and the only way to get that is by getting independence. I believe ALBA will make the push that we need for my generation and generations to come to see that that happens.
Well, thank you to Cynthia, to Michelle, to Ailsa, to Caroline and to Stephanie. Last year, for the 700th anniversary, I contributed to a project on the Arbroath Declaration. What struck me about the essays in that book was how the concepts which underpin the Declaration still resonate today. That we are shaped and moulded by our history, but we are defined by how we apply these principles to our own lives and to the here and now. The Declaration of Arbroath is a statement from history, but one with profound and modern ideas. Of course, the Arbroath document was not in reality a declaration. Rather, it was a letter asserting Scotland's rights to the international authority of the day, the Avignon Papacy. The importance of the Declaration was not that it came just for those in positions of wealth and authority. Rather, its enduring power and appeal was it was written for the whole community of the realm of Scotland. It was the recognition of the need for the essential endorsement by the community of the realm, which elevated the letter far beyond what it could otherwise have been if simply endorsed by the loyal supporters of the Bruce, and how successful that strategy was. Within a few years of the Declaration, international opinion moved decisively in favour of the Scots. It was the English king who became diplomatically isolated, and 8 years later, Scottish independence was negotiated, acknowledged, and accepted. As it was then, so it can be now. The appeal for Scottish independence cannot, should not be restricted by party. No one party has the ownership of Scottish independence. It is rooted in the sovereignty of the people, all of the people. Scotland's Parliament is the modern democratic expression of the community of the realm. It exists to allow modern Scotland to define its own future, to tell the wider world who we are and who we want to be. And in this election, more than any other, it should be putting nation before party. We need to come together to work to create a parliament which encompasses all shades of opinion, prepared to back Scottish independence. The Tory Prime Minister must not be allowed to cast this great debate as party against party, Prime Minister against First Minister. If he does that, Scotland will lose. This needs to become what we all know it to be: a Tory Prime Minister standing against the will of Scotland's Parliament, representing Scotland's people. Now, Boris Johnson has already declared he will ignore SNP victory as a basis for a referendum. But even if he can ignore a party, he cannot ignore a Parliament and a nation. Our task is therefore to give voice to Scotland's modern community of the realm, to demand self-determination, to assert nationhood, and the need for respect and equality across these islands. That can start in the Scots Parliament immediately following the election of a supermajority of independents supporting MSPs. Deliver that supermajority, and Parliament then issues a clear and unmistakable instruction to the Scottish Government to open negotiations with Whitehall on independence. That should happen in week 1 of the new Parliament. A standing independence convention can then be established, drawn from all of Scotland's elected representatives, to give support and substance to the Scottish Government's independence negotiating position. A Section 30 referendum could be part of that, as could be a plebiscite or another democratic test, as could domestic legal action or international and diplomatic initiatives, as could peaceful and popular demonstration. The tactics will inevitably evolve with the negotiations, but the strategy is to make the achievement of independence a real and overriding priority. Be clear, if we don't make it ours, Boris Johnson certainly won't make it his. With an independent supermajority, resistance from Westminster to Scotland's renewed claim of right will crumble. Scotland's Parliament and our community of the realm will speak in a voice louder, more united, more insistent than it ever has done before. The key to all of that is to elect a maximum number of independents supporting MSPs. So I'll be voting SNP in my first constituency vote for that reason. And I know that tens of thousands of SNP supporters are going to vote for ALBA on the list for exactly the same reason, because it is in the Scottish national interest to do so. In that unity and common purpose lies our strength and our greatest opportunity to deliver independence. That approach can deliver a shared parliamentary purpose in Holyrood, which changes the context of the debate and which tilts the balance of power in Scotland's favour. It is the only way to guarantee that Scotland cannot again be sidelined and to ensure that democratic expression will prevail. Westminster has never before faced that expression of collective parliamentary might, mobilising the entire community of the realm. It's time that changed. It's time to put nation before party. It's time to declare for Scotland. And therefore today, a declaration for Scotland. We hereby proclaim the sovereign right of the Scottish people to determine the form of government best suited to their needs, and declare and pledge that in all our actions, their interests will be paramount. We further declare and pledge that our deliberations shall be directed to the following ends: to assert the sovereign right of the Scottish people acting through their Parliament to secure independence, to mobilise Scottish and international opinion to ensure that this right is respected and acted upon. For in truth, it is not for glory or riches or honours for which we are fighting, but for liberty, for that alone which no honest person gives up, but with life itself. And that's issued today in Ellon, Aberdeenshire, on the 6th of April 2021, and will be distributed on the World Wide Web. Thank you very much, and now we're extremely open to questions. And if everyone could please state their name as they ask their question. Stephen Brown, STV News.
Hi there. Yeah, Stephen Brown from STV News here. I just wondered who, after this election, if you have a group of MSPs, will decide the strategy going forward in terms of when an independence referendum should be held. Will it be yourself or will it be Nicola Sturgeon? And when do you think a referendum should be held? Should it be after the current health crisis has passed?
Well, Stephen, can I direct you to the speech I've just made? Our thinking in ALBA, and this is our contribution to the debate, the strength of our voice will be determined by the Scottish people and the number of ALBA MSPs that they elect. But our belief is in the first week of the Parliament together should issue an instruction to the Scottish Government to begin negotiations for Scottish independence. Thereafter, as I've outlined today, we see the formation of a Scottish Independence Convention, which will represent all of the elected members in Scotland. We think that is the way to go to give strength and power, using the supermajority, which we anticipate in the Parliament, to redress the balance between Westminster and Scotland. And I've outlined a range of tactics, including a Section 30 referendum, which might be part of that negotiating process, but there are other tactics as well. In terms of priority, then independence is a priority for ALBA. There's two reasons for that. One is that it's not true that governments can't do two things at the same time. In an administration that I led, we built a bridge over the Forth, a bypass round Aberdeen, a border railway. We introduced free education, and we still had time to fight an independence referendum in 2014. But there's a more important reason than that, Stephen. And that is this, that after the horrors of the last year, the world won't be, shouldn't be, can't be the same again. The world is going to change, and hopefully will change for the better, learning lessons from the tragedies of the last year. Now, we have an economic recovery programme as part of our strategy. We'll be unveiling that next week, a recovery programme from the economic consequences of the pandemic. There are fundamental changes going to take place in this world and in the human condition. And I want to see an independent Scotland as part of these changes, so we address the future collectively as a nation. So this idea that independence is something that can be pushed to the back isn't correct. Independence is essential, that we ensure that recovery from COVID means changes and changes for the better in Scottish society. Next question. Hi, Tom. Tom Martin, Daily Express. On you go, Tom.
Hi. Thank you. You said it's possible for a government to do two things at once, but your critics will say it's utterly grotesque and reckless to be pursuing independence talks at this time during the pandemic. I just wonder what your response to that is. And secondly, how do you define a supermajority? As you know, there's certain types of legislation in Holyrood that require 2/3 supermajority. You talk about a maximum number of pro-independence MSPs, but what do you have in mind for a supermajority?
Well, Tom, if we take the Sunday Times poll at the weekend, that suggested almost 80 independents supporting MSPs if you counted the SNP, the Green Party and ALBA together. I think we can go higher than that, but that of course depends on the verdict to the people. I mean, if you take where I am just now in the northeast of Scotland, there was 137,000 SNP votes on the list ballot in the last Scottish Parliament elections. They elected precisely 0 MSPs from that list ballot. If these people, a substantial portion of them, and others, of course, Tom, Express readers and people across the country were to vote for ALBA on the list, then all 4 of our candidates here in the northeast of Scotland would be elected. And of course, a similar pattern would take place across Scotland. So the poll at the weekend suggested 80 independents supporting MSPs. I think 79 was the exact figure. I think it could go a lot higher than that, but only if the people wish it to happen. As for critics, well, I mean, when we unveil our COVID recovery plan and the economic measures that we are suggesting, practical, immediate measures which can be taken to face the scale of the economic tsunami which is going to descend upon us, then you'll see that these plans are very, very important to ALBA, and we'll be bringing forward ideas which meet the scale of the issue and the challenge, which as yet I haven't seen from any other political party. Next question, please.
Thank you. Denise Findlay, New Media Group. My question's about the 2014 independence referendum. You led Scotland to our first chance of independence in 300 years. What did you learn from that experience, the process and the campaign that we'll be able to use in our new independence campaign?
Well, the biggest overriding lesson I learned, Denise, was if we'd managed to bring in earlier the Grassroots campaign that we managed to ignite in the summer of 2014, then I think we'd have won the referendum. And there's various reasons for why that didn't come into place until the high summer of 2014. Organisational reasons, political reasons. Perhaps I myself didn't foresee, as leader of the campaign, the extent of the grassroots upsurge there could be and the importance that would have for changing the minds of people on independence, but more importantly, galvanising people who'd never voted before, but decided that the issue of national independence was important to vote on in 2014. I'm detecting within ALBA the same mood, the same range of opinion, the same enthusiasm and galvanisation as I detected in the Yes campaign. I think ALBA, in many senses, is the Yes campaign reborn in political form in 2021. And if we can keep and extend and give substance to that mood in the next few weeks, then we'll take some stopping as the campaign develops. Next question.
Mr. Salmond, it's...
Hi, Sev. On you go. Yeah.
Severin Carell here from The Guardian. Hello, Alex. Recent opinion polls show that only a small minority of voters in Scotland want to hold a referendum in the next 2 to 3 years. Why do you think you would have a mandate to begin campaigning for independence on day one if the polls show that most voters don't want it so soon?
Well, again, maybe obviously I've just made the speech, Sev, but what we've argued for is that the Scottish Parliament in week one should instruct the Scottish Government to initiate and begin independence negotiations with the Westminster Government. You know, as part of these negotiations, there could be a referendum, a Section 30 referendum or a plebiscite, but there's a range of other initiatives that we would argue you would bring forward if the Westminster Government is not prepared to engage in these negotiations. I don't think we should pigeonhole ourselves into a Section 30 referendum for very obvious reasons, because Boris Johnson's already said he'll turn that down if it's put forward by a party. Therefore, mobilising the supermajority, we have to give the Scottish Government a mandate to enter negotiations with a range of tactics. The aim of the national movement in Scotland is not to secure a referendum. The aim of the national movement in Scotland is to secure independence for our country, of which a referendum of one kind or another, it could be one of the democratic tests to enable us to do so. So the mandate we're seeking is to begin negotiations. That won't be the conclusion of negotiations, it'll be the beginning of negotiations. Next question.
On PA. At the weekend, you mentioned ALBA was working on discussing what policies the party had beyond independence. I was wondering if you could give us an update on that, let us know where the party stands on, for example, where an independent Scotland, if it would be rejoining the EU, if it would be joining NATO. Can you let us know what the discussions have been around that? I know some of your candidates earlier were talking about the impact of Brexit. Can we take from that you want to see a return to the EU very quickly?
Thank you, Neil. The policy conference, which was our first policy conference in a party which is sub 10 or 11 days old, Neil, on Saturday discussed 4 issues: the route to independence, the one I'm enunciating today. We discussed the economic recovery programme from COVID to meet the extent of challenges that we expect to see in the Scottish economy. We'll be unveiling that next week. We discussed the aspects of education policy. Again, that will be unveiled next week. and we discussed and passed a paper on women and inequalities, which will go to our women's conference this coming weekend, and you'll see that publicised on Friday and Saturday. Other papers are coming forward in terms of some of the issues you've discussed and Scotland's position in Europe and the world, and as they go through our policy conferences, then we'll unveil these policies in the course of the campaign. Next question. Tom Gordon of the Herald. Tom?
Hello there, Alex. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes. You're coming through loud and clear, Tom.
Thanks very much. Can I just take you back to this definition of a supermajority? Because it seems quite extraordinary that you should predicate your campaign on seeking a supermajority, but you have not defined what a supermajority is. Now, it is defined in statute. The last Scotland Act of 2016 defined it as 2/3 of MSPs, meaning 86 MSPs. If there is not a supermajority, as you put it, of 86 MSPs, would one be established?
Well, that is not the definition of supermajority we're using. Let me put it this way, Tom. If there was 70, definition? Well, I was just going to answer if there was 70 MSPs supporting independence, that would be a majority, and I'd expect to see that majority move forward with an independence platform. If there were 80 MSPs supporting independence, as the polls at the weekend indicated, then we'd be well on the way to a supermajority. And indeed, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the Sunday Times described that as a supermajority. If there were 90 MSPs, which I think is well within our reach for the independence supporting parties, then that would be a bigger supermajority. The point that we're making in the campaign, Tom, is that the stronger the supermajority of MSPs are supporting independence in the Scottish Parliament, the more the balance of power will be tilted in Scotland's favour, and the more will transform an argument which has taken place party to party, Prime Minister to First Minister, will be revealed and shown to be an argument about Boris Johnson as a Tory Prime Minister taking on a Parliament and a nation, which will be a fundamentally weaker position for Boris Johnson and a fundamentally stronger position for Scotland. And the more independent supporting MSPs there are, then the better things are going to be for Scotland. And that's why a vote for ALBA on the regional list is the right way to deliver it. Next question.
Hi, Alex. It's Simon here.
Hi, Simon. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Nicola Sturgeon has set out her own 11-point plan to pursue independence after the election, which is quite different from yours and its process. Given the SNP are going to be by far the largest independence party, isn't it likely that she'll just go with her own plan rather than listening to yours? And secondly, on the question of whether you two can work together, she did say some quite harsh things last week. She said initially that she wouldn't unless you showed contrition for inappropriate, not criminal, but inappropriate behaviour with women. And then she seemed to toughen up her position later in an interview with Channel 4 News, in which she said she wouldn't work with you at all. And I just wondered what you made of that. Thank you.
Well, I think, Simon, you missed out the interview with ITN, which suggested, of course, she would follow the guidance of the people and work with what was in the Parliament. And I'm sure all parties will do that, incidentally. And as for the SNP's 11-point plan, I think you'll find that point 5 of the 11-point plan talks about building a majority, an independence majority, potentially with other independence parties in the Parliament. So I think in the 11 points, the SNP have acknowledged that working with other independence parties is going to be important, potentially, in the strength of that majority for independence in the Parliament. I think, we're at a stage in Scotland when we have to leave the personal behind, and I'm going to continue in this campaign to stress the national. That is the national interest. And the national interest is in electing as many as possible independent supporting MSPs into that Parliament to build that supermajority, to strengthen Scotland's hands, to allow us to deliver progress towards independence for Scotland. Now, we are one party of a number supporting independence. The strength of our voice will depend on the verdict to the people. I'm merely saying the most potential for growth in that independence supermajority lies in voting for ALBA in the regional list. And a number of our unionist opponents have been kind enough to recognise, as they say it, the threat that ALBA poses to them, as we would say the opportunity that ALBA offers to Scotland. Next question.
Hi, Alex. Dave Llewellyn for 12 Heats. Basically, this campaign that you're starting today is a very different kind of campaign for the one that you're used to, which is going to involve a lot more sort of grassroots involvement than the sort of normal political class using branches and things like that. Given that there's a lot of there's a lack of the actual infrastructure way up at the moment, and the SNP aren't talking to their branches anyway. So basically, how are you going to actually engage with the grassroots and get them out and get them activated for this?
Well, our grassroots are growing fast, Dave. I mean, as you know, last Friday, I think it was, we overtook the Liberal Democrats in terms of membership in Scotland. We've got our eyes firmly fixed on overtaking the Green Party and the Conservative Party. And among our many members, we have many people who want to be active. Now, because of COVID restrictions, obviously there's a limitation on the range of activities you can take part in, but there's some things you can do, and you can believe me, the ALBA members will be doing these. Obviously, a lot of this campaign, more than ever before, will be fought in the new media. But that has advantages for a new party as well, and we'll be as innovative and exciting and interesting as we possibly can be. So I have no fears that ALBA will make a strong, distinctive and recognisable presence online and in terms of the impression that people get across Scotland in terms of what they can see visually in the real world as well. So both virtually and in the real world, ALBA will be there and making a big impression in this campaign. I mean, the one missing link we have at the present moment is presence on television, and that hopefully there'll be a fair recognition by the broadcasters that given the parliamentary representation already of ALBA after 10 days, given the number of councillors, which is growing by the day we have over Scotland, given there are 32 wonderful candidates, 18 women, 14 men, putting forward distinctive and creative points of view from the ALBA platform, given all of these things and our overtaking of the Liberal Democrats, a party which has been in business for 150 years in various disguises of one kind and another, given that we've already overtaken them on every measurement thus far, then we hope that the broadcasters will give us a fair kick at the ball in this campaign. But there'll be nothing to fear by the mobilisation of the ALBA grassroots. Our grassroots are growing, they're strong, and they'll be very, very visible online and in the real world. Thanks, Dave. Next question. Joe?
Rachel Watson from Daily Mail. I just want to go back to your talk of beginning negotiations and other ways of independence without a referendum. Obviously, you're trying to win over SNP voters to back you on the regional list. But what kind of message does this send to soft no voters, people who are potentially flirting with the idea of voting for independence if there should be a referendum? I mean, does that really help the cause overall when you talk about things like this? And just quickly on Simon's question regarding Nicola Sturgeon, I mean, do you really expect that she would work with you after everything that's been said and everything that's gone on over the last few months? And have you tried to reach out to her at all, or anybody senior within the SNP?
Well, I get messages from senior people in the SNP on a daily basis. Often it's asking for an application form for the ALBA party, as you've seen in many of the announcements that we've made over recent days, Rachel. I expect all politicians, and Nicola included, to accept the verdict of the people and to work with the Parliament that the people give us, and certainly the independent supporters and voters and MSPs in that Parliament comprising that supermajority is the key touchstone of our ability to advance the independent cause. And I know that Nicola will be able to put national above personal. So I'll be working constructively, and I'll signpost that during this campaign by expressing no negativity whatsoever, but being entirely positive about the campaign for independence. And as for your statement, Rachel, if I may say so, that we're only after, as you put it, SNP voters. Well, you've got a strong point, and the point I made earlier, which in the northeast of Scotland, 137,000 SNP voters on the list last time round elected 0 MSPs. So quite clearly, many of these people will say we can make our votes count by voting ALBA on the regional list. But I'm not restricting ALBA's ambition to one category of voters. We want all voters to consider voting ALBA in the regional list, including Daily Mail readers, who are an extremely important part of the Scottish population, and many of them might surprise you, Rachel, in terms of their range of views, that they might find a number of things that ALBA are putting forward extremely attractive. There are many people who want to see some grit in the independence oyster, and the arguments that ALBA put forward, and more importantly, perhaps, the manner in which we do so, I think will be attractive to a range of voters. But thank you very much. And next question. Hello, Dan. Can you hear me?
Hi, Alex. Yes, I can. There are figures in the indie movement, including some of those who have defected from the SNP to your party, who have previously voiced concerns about the pace at which Nicola Sturgeon is moving on independence. And is your return to frontline politics down to the fact you believe parts of that movement have lost confidence in the First Minister on whether she will actually move forward with pushing for that referendum? And secondly, this ultimately remains a pandemic election. How do you rate Nicola Sturgeon's handling of the pandemic?
Well, I'll take the last point first. I think not just myself, but the vast majority of opinion would say that her communication, which is a key aspect in a pandemic of the issues and challenges facing people, has been vastly superior to that of Boris Johnson and the Westminster government, and she's rightly being given plaudits for that. In terms of what provokes ALBA, ALBA exists because we see that there is an opportunity to take Scotland's case forward. So what's provoking ALBA is an entirely positive opportunity that we can see. There's a very interesting article by Andy McKeever, the former media director of the Scottish Conservative Party. I think it's in the Herald today, where Andy points out that the ALBA phenomena, let's call it that, in European terms, would be the norm. It would be exactly the norm to see a flourishing of a range of parties in a proportional system, which comprise various aspects of an overall point of view. So it's not ALBA who's out of step. It's the Westminster system, first past the post system, which confines people narrowly to a number of parties. As far as Scotland and independence is concerned, then the SNP over the last almost 100 years now has done the vast bulk of the heavy lifting in parliamentary terms on the cause of Scottish independence. But it hasn't had a sole prerogative over it, or any arbitrary authority over it. If you think of the various movements that have been in the post-war period, and I think of the Scottish Covenant of the early 1950s, or the claim of right, which the ALBA Declaration today is modelled on, incidentally, of 1988. The Constitutional Convention, which the SNP didn't take part, but more obviously and more recently, and perhaps more relevant of all, the Yes campaign of the high summer of 2014, which I believe that ALBA most closely represents. Now, that included people, by definition, since it was much larger than any political party at that stage. That included people who'd never been in politics before, who were attracted into that movement by its vigour, by its determination, by its joyous way it approached the political debate. And if we in ALBA can give a political form to that, then we'll be, I think, catching a mood which is still prevalent in many sections of Scottish society. So it goes beyond what has been offered in party political form to date. And whatever it is, it's an entirely positive initiative to build the supermajority to strengthen Scotland's hand. Next question. Chris.
Chris McCall, the Daily Record here. Alex, can I ask, you signed the Edinburgh Agreement with David Cameron back in 2012 that obviously set out a legally binding referendum via Section 30 order, subsequently described as the gold standard of holding such a vote. Can I ask, if you turn your back on the importance of a Section 30 order, do you risk undermining the credibility of the independence campaign, particularly amongst the international community?
Well, on the contrary, because obviously what we're calling for, Chris, is for the Scottish Government to be instructed by the Scottish Parliament, representing the people and the whole community of the realm of Scotland, to initiate negotiations with the Westminster Government. By definition, if you're initiating negotiations, you have something which is accepted and legally binding. You're quite right. I delivered and negotiated a referendum in 2014. But you may also remember, of course, that the Section 30 order wasn't the only thing that was being explored in the 2012 and 2011 in the run-up to that Edinburgh Agreement. We were exploring, as is well known, and we were exploring a multi-option referendum, we were exploring a plebiscite, we were exploring a whole range of things. And of course, it was by dint of the fact that these issues were being ventilated and explored, which made the Prime Minister of the day, how shall I put this, more keen on a Section 30 order being granted than he might otherwise have been. So if you examine the speech I've made, you'll see that I do say that a Section 30 order is very much a possibility. I'm saying that it's not the only possibility. And neither, incidentally, does the SNP 11-point plan. My criticism of the SNP 11-point plan, and I make this in an entirely constructive and positive way, that it may have perhaps 10 points too many in it. I think the real nature of the plan that will deliver independence is to have the Scottish Parliament mandate to the Scottish Government to initiate negotiations. The tactics you use in negotiations will evolve as these negotiations continue. But whatever the tactic that is decided upon, it has enormously more chance of creating an impression on Westminster, in bending Westminster to the will of the Scottish people, if there is a massive supermajority of independent supporting MSPs in that Parliament. And that is what this election is about. Next question. Pilar, welcome. Question.
Hello. Good afternoon, Mr. Salmond. Pilar Fernandez, Rosalia TV, Galicia, North of Spain. My question, Mr. Salmond, is in this route or this strategy that you just have announced could be compared with the so-called Catalan way and bring up the myth of the Spanish veto to an independent Scotland in the EU again? And if so, to combat that, how are you to ally those fears? Thank you.
Pilar, I have to apologise for the audio connection there, but for the benefit of the other journalists listening, Pilar was asking if the strategy that I've been espousing today could be compared with the Catalonian strategy of a couple of years ago. Well, the answer is no, Pilar, principally because, as I know you know, the constitutions of Spain and the United Kingdom are fundamentally different. The Spanish constitution, rightly or wrongly, I would say wrongly, specifically forbids any region of Spain, Catalonia included, to initiate or to have the sovereign will to decide on secession for Spain. I think that's wrong. I think the people in Catalonia should have that right. But the Spanish constitution was amended to specifically forbid it. That is not the constitutional position in the United Kingdom. Scotland is part of the United Kingdom by dint of an international treaty in 1707. The recognition of Scottish sovereignty, the ability of the Scottish people to determine the government best suited to their needs, has of course been accepted by every Prime Minister since Harold Wilson, and will have to be accepted by Boris Johnson if that strength of will is expressed in convincing enough form. The declaration that I've announced today from the ALBA party, which will be broadcast through the World Wide Web and will be rallying people to its cause on this anniversary of the Declaration of Arbroath, of course, is closely modelled on the claim of right of 1988 and 1989. which of course was had among its signatories, I think, if I remember correctly, every single Scottish Labour MP at the time, which was quite a few at that time, with the sole exception, I remember correctly, of Tam Dalyell. In other words, the recognition of the sovereignty of the people has been a common factor in Scottish politics for many, many years, acknowledged by prime ministers, because Scotland is a nation in a voluntary association with the United Kingdom by an international treaty of 1707. And it's the right of this nation to self-determination and the right of this nation to choose to be independent if that is the wish of the Scottish people. What we are testing in this election is the wishes of the Scottish people. I think if that wish is expressed by the supermajority in the Scottish Parliament, it will vastly strengthen Scotland's hands in negotiation to present a clear route and direction of taking the country to independence. But thank you for Pila, and many apologies that the line from Spain wasn't as great as it should have been. Next question, please.
Hi, Alex. Andrew Lermont from Holyrood Magazine here. This follows on slightly from Pilar's question and Chris's question. You know, you've said that Boris Johnson can ignore a party, but he can't ignore a parliament or a nation. The truth is, you could have 129 pro-independence MSPs in Holyrood, and Boris Johnson would be under no obligation to do anything. And if he's not a willing participant in negotiations, then you don't have international recognition, and you're kind of in the same situation that Catalonia was, aren't you? And then secondly, if I may, your plan is to mandate Nicola Sturgeon's government to lead these negotiations, but you've said you expect her to put the national above the personal, but you've previously accused her of misleading MSPs and breaking the ministerial code. Do you think that anyone in the UK government will be able to trust her in those negotiations?
Right, Andrew, and I've also said, as I said before we entered this campaign, at the conclusion of the two court cases, the three inquiries, that people, it was time to accept the conclusions of these inquiries, the ones you agree with, and heard many of these, of course, that I agreed with, and the ones you didn't, and it was time to move on. So I'm moving on, and I'm making that position clear throughout this campaign. And of course, as I say, the ALBA, everything we say and do in this campaign will be building the positive case for Scottish independence. And as for the first part of your question, your views seems to have undergone a transition in your move from the National to the Holyrood Magazine, if I may say so, Andrew. Congratulations to the Holyrood Magazine, incidentally, in securing your services. I don't agree that it doesn't make a difference. I think it makes a world of difference. For the reasons I said from history, incidentally, I was trying to look at the resonance of why the expression, the community of the realm of Scotland, was so powerful and when it was enunciated in the Declaration of Arbroath in 1320. I mean, that brought that document beyond the usual medieval caste lists of the barons, the nobles, the freeholders, the clergy, the king. It brought it into something else entirely, embraced the community of the realm of Scotland. Similarly, in the modern day, and looking to the future, it makes a fundamental difference in terms of the balance of power if the expression that comes to demand Scotland's rights be acknowledged, it doesn't come from a single political party, but comes from a supermajority of independence supporting MSPs. That enormously strengthens the position of those negotiating for Scottish independence and makes it a matter not just of Prime Minister against First Minister, but a Tory Prime Minister against the mandated will of the Scottish Parliament, representing the Scottish people and the community of the realm. And all of the other actions, potential actions, which I've outlined today, anticipating that these negotiations, at least in their early stages, it will require some persuasion if we are to have a Tory Prime Minister engaged constructively in them. The range of options I've outlined are those you could only mobilise if you're speaking for the community of the realm. When the Arbroath letter was sent in 1320, Scotland hardly had a diplomatic friend in the world. After the receipt and enunciation of that declaration over the next few years, the position was turned on its head. And it was Edward II who ended up totally and utterly diplomatically isolated, which was a major factor in Scotland securing the acceptance of its independence at the Treaty of Northampton in Edinburgh in 1328. Similarly, in the modern world, the expression of will of the community of the realm through Scotland's Parliament, the mobilisation of the Scottish people, the recognition that we've got to make Boris Johnson stand not against a single political party, but a Parliament and a nation is fundamentally important if we intend to win this cause, the most important cause of all, Scotland's cause, the cause of independence. Next question.
Hi, it's Muir Dickey.
Hi, Muir.
Hi there.
On you go.
You've mentioned a few times plebiscite as an alternative to a Section 30 referendum. Can you tell us a bit more about what you mean by plebiscite and what's the difference between that and a referendum? And more broadly, you say that Westminster opposition will crumble if there are enough independent supporting MSPs at Holyrood. But what if it doesn't? How far are you willing to go? Would you, for example, be willing to consider tactics go beyond UK law?
Well, I think it would be Scots law that was important, would it not, Muir, for tactics? But I think I make the point in the extensive list that I've given you as part of the speech. We're talking about the possibility, in addition to legal action domestically, legal action internationally, diplomatic pressure, mobilising world opinion, that popular and peaceful demonstration would be very much part of any such process if it comes to that. You say that. Let me pray and aid the former Secretary of State for Scotland, David Mundell, who last week saw in the ALBA party's emergency a fundamental threat, as he put it, to the future of the Union. Now, I don't always agree with David Mundell, but I certainly agree with him in his analysis of the ALBA party. He saw the fundamental threat. Clearly, he thinks the threat is such that it endangers, as he sees it, the future of the Union. Well, it can't be endangering the future of the Union unless the numbers of independents supporting MSPs in the Parliament are highly significant. So in a situation where our political opponents seem to be in a desperate flap about the political trends that are taking place very early in this campaign, and let me say that the only surprise I've had in this campaign thus far is that ALBA are starting to register as quickly as we have. I mean, that is an extraordinary position. But whatever the position is now, your position of ALBA will grow and strengthen as this campaign develops. Because the argument, as I've illustrated here in the northeast of Scotland, but it would equally apply across the country. The argument that 137,000 SNP votes in the list last time round elected no MSPs, but could elect 4 ALBA MSPs if we are successful in persuading enough people to vote for us, them and all the others, including Daily Mail readers, that we want to vote for us, then as that argument starts to hit home in this campaign, and you'll find that the appeal of ALBA is greatly strengthened, and the hopes of that supermajority are also greatly strengthened. That will be a winning position for Scotland in the next Scottish Parliament. Next question. No more questions, right? Well, it behoves me then to thank you all. And can I say that ALBA is 10, 11 days old as a political party. And in every sense, our candidates, our campaign messages, the policies that are coming into place, and our ability, I think, with only one technical hitch today, to get across these press conferences is showing our developing experience as the new political force and the fastest growing political force in Scotland. So thank you all very much indeed for attending on this, the launch of the campaign. There'll be many more such occasions over the next 4 weeks as the campaign develops. Thank you again.
Hatar uprich drast, ach gushimpley, mahashisha giri can be ALBA nyo ishamalach, can you laun ach da vot son bechor. An chiahu la yen hiechin had da vot taku. Clech gehiet vot an rune te gan SNP, agus gan tactige inatal SNP. Son a vod skirel, hor of a vod do varti na ALBA, gus an fashion sad vor chuch son jo ishamalach. Han da vod seo cola I gahar hu cushion do vat na ALBA, agus a genu kienchach gan fashion sad vor chuch son jo ishamalach an sa farla mit bliana. He gave cola ig albaparty.org.